Some people gain sexual pleasure by getting spanked, whipped, tied up, or having hot candle wax dripped on their skin. Some enjoy losing control and shifting power to their dominant partner, or obeying orders and maybe getting punished for their misdeeds, sometimes for no apparent reason. Some are aroused by being verbally or physically humiliated during sex, and others enjoy playing the role of a pet, a fictional character, or a slave. All of these desires involve gaining sexual pleasure from pain, control, and humiliation to some extent. BDSM is an abbreviation encompassing all such sexual desires and activities. BDSM stands for Bondage and Discipline, Dominance and Submission, Sadism and Masochism. The last pair, sadism and masochism, forms the term sadomasochism. BDSM is a newer term compared to sadomasochism and is a larger umbrella that encompasses sadomasochism. Thus, sadomasochism is part of BDSM. In the scientific literature of this field, these two terms are often used interchangeably. Let's take a look at the historical roots of the term sadomasochism. Kraft Ebing, a German sex researcher and psychiatrist, first used the two terms in his book in 1886. Where did he get the idea for these terms? The term masochism goes back to Sadomasoch, an Austrian novelist. He wrote stories about men who've been humiliated and tortured by beautiful women. Sadomasoch seems to be experiencing the same thing in his personal life. He seems to have spent much of his adult life trying to get women to dominate him, including having them whip him and having them betray him by having sex with other men. The term sadism has a similar story. It goes back to the French author Marquis de Sade, whose personal life and erotic novels were associated with pain, humiliation, and dominance in sexual relationships. Sexual masochism is a desire in which a person gets sexual pleasure from at least one of the following: receiving pain, relinquishing control through bondage, rules, commands, or other means, and embarrassment or humiliation. Therefore, not all types of sexual masochism, for example, include pain. Regarding this definition of masochism, we can define sadism as the presence of at least one characteristic of the tendency to inflict pain, control, or the embarrassment and humiliation associated with sexual pleasure. For sex to be called sadomasochistic sex, at least one of these characteristics must be present. If none of these characteristics are present in sex, it's not sadomasochistic sex. For example, you may want your partner to cover your eyes and tie your hands, but you do not want to be in pain. Maybe you like to be humiliated in sex, but hate feeling controlled. Or perhaps you want your partner to control you and give pain to you, but you don't like humiliation at all. Finally, you might want all of these together. These, which are just a few possible combinations, are different forms of masochistic desires. At the same time, it does not matter if the person has implemented these desires or if everything is just a matter of thought and fantasy. In any case, these tendencies are masochistic. Well, almost all major surveys of sexual behavior have completely ignored sadomasochism. Therefore, our estimates of the prevalence of sadomasochistic behaviors are incomplete. Also, in cases where polls have been conducted on this subject, it's not easy to rely on the results, as many people have such desires but refuse to disclose them in the polls. In a systematic review, the researchers reviewed 88 studies on BDSM. They concluded that studies on the prevalence of sadomasochism show very divergent results. The researchers suggested several reasons for this divergence. Let's review two of them. Firstly, the results vary depending on how general or specific the questions are. In cases where the desire for sadomasochism or BDSM in general has been questioned without providing a clear definition, a lower prevalence has been reported compared to when a particular desire or activity such as bondage, whipping, or blindfolding was being questioned. According to one study, 46.8% of the population had experienced BDSM activity at least once. Yet, according to the same study, only 7.6% of the population consider themselves part of the BDSM community. Secondly, the results vary depending on what aspects of the desire for BDSM has been examined. Some studies have examined BDSM-related interests or fantasies, while others have questioned the practical experience of BDSM. As one can guess, the second group reported less prevalence than the first group. According to one study, 69% of the population has fantasies about BDSM activities. Justin Lehmiller, who conducted the largest poll on sexual fantasies in the United States, came to a similar conclusion. According to the results of his survey, with more than 4,000 participants, 60% of people had the fantasy of giving pain, and 65% had the fantasy of receiving pain during sex. BDSM-related fantasies are so common that only 4% of women and 7% of men say they've never had such fantasies. People practice these desires with different intensities and frequencies. The nature of their activities is also heterogeneous. However, at the core of all BDSM experiences is a power shift. In subsequent videos, we'll get deeper into different aspects of BDSM desires.